as many people as possible. It is said that when people vie with each other in terms of the world and the dunya, many people are trying to vie with each other. How do the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala vie with each other? They find pride into how many people get connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through them. Right? How many people can get it? They call it man dakhala fi da'irat al-hadrat al-ahadiyya wa da'irat al-hadrat al-muhammadiyya. Those who enter into that special circle of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the special lovers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is how the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala find pride. And they find pride in the ummah coming back to the deen, and ummah connecting themselves to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is Habib Umar will explain now that the closest person to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the one that has the concern for the ummah. Then yesterday we also spoke about how the verses of the Quran, that the ones who sit at home are not equal to the ones who strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their wealth and their persons. And we spoke a little bit about how a person ought to have a portion of their wealth in all the different types of good deeds. It doesn't suffice for a person to say, I'm only going to use my wealth for example, for helping orphans. The people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they divide, besides their zakah, which they give, which is an obligation, the other wealth that they have, a portion in everyone according to their karam. And if we read the books that talk about, or the ahadith that just talk about charity, and the collections of ahadith that talk about charity, one will realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create wealth for the sake of hoarding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only created wealth so that it can be given away and used in society, for the upliftment of people and upliftment of the deen. Because the reality is, when you give money, does your wealth increase or decrease? So a materialistic philosophy will say it's decreasing. Physically it is decreasing. But this is the whole concept of barakah. And if we find it difficult to give, knowing that our wealth is going to increase, then our priorities are upside down, especially if there is a need. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends people to you for a particular need, then that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you an opportunity to increase your wealth. Because if that person didn't come, whether or not you're actually helping out someone or you're part of some charitable cause, then a person might or might not be involved in these things. So there's a famous story about, it was a very famous, became a viral message that used to go around. It was called the 10th partner, about how a person dealt with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are traders and businessmen who become awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just because of how they use their wealth. Right? You might not see them doing lots of ibadah or carrying a tasbih or they might not even be ulama, right? But they have reached the highest levels of wilaya because of how they use their wealth. And so this person, he found 9 of his friends, just in Egypt. It's a famous story, it's online as well. 9 of his friends, and they decided they want to open up a company, and they couldn't find a 10th partner because they wanted to have a certain amount of money. They needed 10 partners, so they only found 9. So he came back the next day and he said, I found the 10th partner. We'll make the 10th partner Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning the shares will be distributed evenly between 10 people. And 1/10 of that share will go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning 1/10 of the profits, as a shareholder, we will give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we will use it for charitable cause in which we will make mashwara about. And they, even in the contract, when they wrote the contract, they said this is the contract between so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? With the intention that Allah will protect us and allow the business to flourish and the business was successful. So they decided to increase the portion of the 10th partner to, or the share of the 10th partner to 20%. And then from 20 to 30 and 30 to 40, right? Until the entire business, 100%, they gave it to the 10th partner. And then one small business ended up doing what even the government of Egypt could not do, in terms of building railroads and universities, educating people, uplifting the community, building hospitals. Why? Is because how they deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a person who is a person of wealth, Their path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using their wealth in where the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And the path to ibadah for them will forever be closed. A person who has wealth and is sitting and trying to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with ibadah, he hasn't understood his purpose. He's first got to use his wealth to uplift people, to assist the deen, and then the door of ibadah will open for him. A poor person doesn't obviously have a means, so for him the door for ibadah is open, and the path for knowledge for both of them is imperative. So people would, besides their zakat, whether it's their salaries, they would decide, my salary that I receive on a monthly basis, what percentage of it do I want to give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? 1%, 2%, 3, 4, 10. Everything is up to you. When you read the stories of the pious, they would give, even of Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein, they would say 4 times in his life he gave away everything he owned. That's how their charity was. They said, how can we give charity and hold back from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If we have to give the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give charity, we have to give up everything that we own. And so it would say, kharaja min malihi. Kharaja min malihi means everything that he owned, they gave it away. Right? And is that wealth increasing or decreasing? And in no time, obviously, they would have made those returns, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have sent someone else. The book Fadail al-Sadaqat of the Shaykh Muhammad Zakaria Kandahlam is a very, very nice book in this regard. The Fadail al-Sadaqat, the virtues of Sadaqah. And you read the stories, and the stories are also taken from the Ihya Ulumuddin of how the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who had wealth dealt with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their wealth. Right? And they would try to not leave a single portion of khair or goodness except that they gave, whether it was orphans, whether it was widows, whether it was a masjid, whether it was upliftment, self-development projects, farming, anything, any form of goodness, they would try and do that. The Prophet ﷺ as well teaches us how. He says, Bakiru bis-sadaqat. The meaning of the hadith is, give charity in the early morning because it wards off calamities. Early morning meaning like this time. So Habib Umar initiated in the city of Tarim this project. It's called Bakiru, right? And the charity organization take it upon themselves every single morning to go and distribute charity on your behalf. So you can say, okay, I want 100 Rand, 50 Rand, 10 Rand to be given every single day. So you give 10 Rand for the entire year. So it's maybe 3,650 Rands. You deposit that into their account, but they will take out 10 Rand every day on your behalf and go every morning and take out charity. And your intention is to ward off calamities, and you can take it out on behalf of your family, your whoever any people that you intend. You giving 10 Rand, but if there's 1,000 people giving 10 Rand as well, then what's happening, right? And in this project, they've had millions and millions of Yemeni riyals. Actually, Yemeni riyals goes into the billions because obviously the currency is. But and internationally, people partaking from all over the world. How do we deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to wealth? And how can we tread a path? How can we wayfare, traverse to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using our wealth? This is something that every person has to pay attention to, because also لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِّن سَعَةٍ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in the Quran, in Surah Talaq, right, and he talks about when a person is, if he has to go through a divorce, and then he's got to give a gift to his wife, because the party needs to be amicable, right? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِّن سَعَةٍ. Everyone should give according to their own accord. If you are wealthy, you give a big gift. And if you are poor, you give something according to your own level. So it's not like, okay, I'm not a poor, I'm not a good person, I don't have enough wealth, so I'm just making ends meet. Give. And the way of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was when things were constrained in their wealth, that's when they increased their wealth, their charity. Because they found that my provision is only being decreased because I have not been giving charity. And if I want to increase it, I have to give charity. And also the way of giving charity and the paradigm is not that you want your wealth to increase in this world, it's because you want rewards in the after.
You also see the organization say 4%.
Sorry?
Collection for zakat and all those things. You know, if they're the poor,
yeah,
you use them to go and collect.
Right.
So should you also partake in this?
Yeah, they can partake. Obviously, the charity organizations have their own way in which they operate. If a person is choosing any charity organization to work with, they just need to find out how they operate and what's their rules of operation. And also taking into account also which and how the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how a charity organization goes about their business also is important too. So for example, in Yemen, because of the war, more charity organizations developed after the war than before, because it's an easy way to make money. The charity organization are allowed to take money for their own, for the running of the, meaning you get salaries for the staff. Where does that money come from? It comes from the same zakah and whatever is being given. So people thought, oh, it's an easy job. So they collect money on behalf of, and they advertise and whatever it is, right? Just so that he doesn't have to work. And whether they then doing the work or not, but it's a responsibility on the day of Qiyamah. A person will be answerable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then also, Imam Ghazali would use this measure or the yardstick of measure, in that the piety of a person does not lie in whether you see them in the masjid. In fact, even use the example, he says, do not be deceived by a person you see him wearing, and this is a line in the poetry of the Ihya, you see him wearing tattered clothing, or that his trouser is even halfway between his knee and his ankle, right? He says, test him with a dinar and a dirham. Test him with wealth, and then you'll know whether he's a pious person or not. The true test of a person is how they deal with wealth. Do they fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their dealings with wealth? And if they don't, then all their ibadah means absolutely none. أريه دينار والدرهم تعرف زيه أو غيه أو وراءه. Test him with the dinar and a dirham, and then you know whether they act or not. And this, even in the Ihya al-Muddin, in the Bidayatul Hidayah, when it comes to the bab of ukhuwah, right? On brotherhood or sisterhood or taking someone as a close confidant, you have to test the person with wealth. You test them with wealth to see, are they going to just accept? When you say, okay, I take this, are they negligent when you give someone something to do and pay off, and there's maybe 50 or 60 rands a change? Do they remind you? Do they tell you about it? Or, oh no, it's fine, let it go. And how a person deals with wealth, you can translate that into their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that shows Allah consciousness. Because they are aware that every single penny or every rand or every cent will be accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah. Okay. وقال عن الذين أداهم تقاعدهم عن نقص في إقامتهم لأمر الحق. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after having described that they are not equal those who spend they strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their wealth in the persons, they are not equal to those who sit at home. Allah said about those whom their sitting at home led to a deficiency in their performing their duties or establishing the truth. إن الذين توفاهم الملائكة ظالمي أنفسهم. Those whom the angels took their lives away in a state that they were wronging their own selves. They were wronging their own selves, meaning they were involved in some sort of sin. They weren't fulfilling their duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correctly. قالوا فيما كنتم. So when the angels take their souls in this bad state, they will tell them, قالوا فيما كنتم. What was the state that you were in? قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. They said we were oppressed. We weren't able to fulfill our duties. قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها. And they would reply, was not the earth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expensive enough for you to go and travel therein? So therefore they would say in fiqh that if you are living in any area in which that government or that place is making it difficult for you to practice your religion and fulfill your duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then if you have the means, it is imperative for you to move from that area and go to another area where you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the whole reason why the hijrah took place. And also these have their own rulings in the deen depending on the time, circumstances, and person's conditions. فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمُ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Right? Those people will have the abode of Jahannam, and it is an evil destination. Just because of what? Sitting at home. Not moving through the land to fulfill their duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثم قال في الآية الأخرى, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then said about them in another ayah, وَمَا لَكُمْ أَلَّا تُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلِلَّهِ مِرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And why don't you spend in the path of Allah when for Allah belongs the inheritance of the heavens and the earth? To Allah belongs all the money. The money that is in your hand, when you give it to someone else, has it changed owners? It's still Allah's money. Allah gave it to you and you've given it to someone else. It's still Allah's money. It's just a movement of funds, right, in the same system. But we are deceived by thinking that it's mine. And they would say that the only money that you earn and the only provision that you earn is what? Is that what goes into your stomach. You can have, I mean, we're all sitting with money everywhere, right? If a person has a bank account, of that money, you're only eating 100, let's say 500 rands a month, for example. I don't know what the costs are now, 500 rands a month, right, of food. Your provision is only 500 rands. That money that's sitting around means absolutely nothing. So there were two brothers. One used to sit at home and involve himself in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he had yaqeen, he had complete tawakkul. And there's different levels in how a person deals with money in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are people on the level of what is known as tajreed. Tajreed means they don't have to do any work. In their life, they have this, they are accustomed in their life, in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that without effort, Allah brings their rizq. Right? Meaning he doesn't work, he doesn't have to do anything. Allah has either made people subservient or he's always just constant out of, and we meet people like this as well. I even know many people like that. They don't own anything, right? But at the end of the month end doesn't come, someone will come and say, you know what, use this for your rent. To such an extent, one of these people will tell me he'll be walking on the street, someone will come and give him a lift before he gets off on the other side and say, use this for your monthly, whatever you need. And it's just the amount of money that he needs. These are the people of tajreed, right? They don't need to make an effort for their wealth, right? And they are a small group of people. Then there are the people of means, right? These people are accustomed that they have to make an effort, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up for them. And depending on the effort that they make, that's how much income they would earn or provision they would receive. And then also they need to deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this particular way. So when you are giving wealth, you are merely just transferring an illusionary ownership from yourself to someone else. But in fact, the money all belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا لَكُمْ أَلَّا تُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And why don't you spend in the path of Allah when indeed to Allah belongs the inheritance of the heavens and the earth? لَا يَسْتَوِي مِنْكُمْ مَنْ أَنْفَقَ مِنْ قَبْلِ الْفَتْحِ وَقَاتَلَ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the Sahaba themselves, right? And says, those who spend, now everyone is spending money, but those who spent, right, before the conquest of Makkah, right, can never be on the same level as those who spent afterwards. Or those who spent afterwards can never have the same high level of, or the darajat with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than those who spent before. Why? Because it was in a time of difficulty. So when you spend in times of difficulty, this has more weight with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because after the conquest of Makkah, or the opening of Makkah, everyone became Muslim. Now everyone is spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that time when there were no means available, do you spend or don't you spend? لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل أولئك أعظم درجة من الذين أنفقوا من بعد وقاتلوا. Those are greater, those who spent before the conquest of Makkah are greater in stages with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their charity has more reward than those who spent afterwards. وقاتل, those that also fought in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the like manner, when you do the da'wah and you're doing the efforts for the deen, and remember when we spoke about da'wah, we're not speaking about the narrow-minded concept of da'wah, of just preaching. Okay, da'wah is your life, right? But doing it in a time in ways difficult, there's more weight with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, if you're living in a certain locality where being a Muslim is difficult, right? But to the best of your ability, right, you hold on fast to your deen, and you don't compromise your principles. Then if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after a couple of years, many or that entire locality of people come into Islam, now it's easy to practice your religion. Those now who practice, will they get the same reward as those who practice when they were under difficult circumstances? Of course not, right? إذ قد أنفقوا وقاتلوا معهم فهذا جزاؤهم وأما القاعدون ممن ليس لهم غرض أن يجاهدوا فقد انتهى أمرهم وعلم مصيرهم. As for those, so these people who after the conquest of Mecca, they spent their wealth and they fought. فهذا جزاؤهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلُّ وَعَدَ اللَّهُ. Now everyone, He has promised the good deeds. وَأَمَّا الْقَاعِدُونَ مِمَّنْ لَيْسَ لَهُمْ غَرَضٌ أَنْ يُجَاهِدُوا, as for those who sat at home and they didn't have an intention to fight in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَقَدْ انْتَهَى أَمْرُهُمْ وَعُلِمَ مَصِيرُهُم. The affair came to an end and it is well known what happened to them. Right? And generally these were the hypocrites, those who sat at home. And this is the biggest fear, that if a person is not fulfilling their duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, then this is also a description of the hypocrites. Right? When the Muslims went out for jihad, the only ones that would stay behind were whom? Were those who had a genuine excuse, either due to old age or a physical inability, or the hypocrites. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposed them. Right? The hypocrites would come to the Prophet ﷺ and make excuses about this and that, whatever, and he'd leave them. Right? And when he'd come back from jihad, sometimes they would come back and make they look for validity for their excuses. Prophet ﷺ accepted their excuses. Right? The famous story of the three Sahaba who stayed behind. وَعَلَى الثَّلَاثَةِ الَّذِينَ خُلِّفُوا. The three Sahaba who stayed behind. Look at this. And those entire verses of the Quran, just how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can say, made the tarbiyah of these three Sahaba who stayed behind from the battle of Tabuk when they were going out. There were many that stayed behind from the hypocrites, but these three were believers. And even though they were believers, how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deal with them? Right? And one of the famous hadith, and it's known even for its eloquence in Arabic, right? And they would study it from a grammar perspective and balagha perspective, was the story of the Sahabi, right? That stayed behind with another two Sahabi. They didn't go out for the battle. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ then comes back and asks them why. And he talks about how he wanted to lie, but then he realizes that he can't lie, so he tells the Prophet ﷺ the truth. And the Prophet says, yes, for this, she's speaking the truth, so we'll wait for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. And for 50 days, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet ﷺ and the entire Muslim community not to even speak to them and not to even interact with them. And Allah describes it in the Quran, حَتَّى ضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا. The earth, even though it is expensive, became completely constricted for them. It was part of their tawbah that they went through this trial, right? And the sort of punishment. And in this dunya before the hereafter. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then revealed their repentance. Revealed that He repented to them. This was just because of staying behind from going out with the Prophet ﷺ in battle, not doing your duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And much of the difficulties that we experience in our life, right, is because of us falling short in our duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes just salah, you find people having difficulty in certain things in their life. And then you find, this person is not even regular on their salah. They can do whatever they want to, right? That problem is not going to be solved if you don't fix up your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the foundational bare basics and start step by step, right? A person is not earning a halal income, right? Or they're involved in usurious transactions, right? Everything else is going to go wrong in your life. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared war on the one who is involved in usury. And so therefore the foundational principles always need to be in order. Now, وَأَمَّا هَؤُلَاءِ الْمُجَاهِدُونَ فَقَدْ قَالَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ لَا يَسْتَوِي مِنْكُمْ مَنْ أَنْفَقَ مِنْ قَبْلِ الْفَتْحِ وَقَاتَلَ أُولَٰئِكَ أَعْظَمُ دَرَجَةً مِنَ الَّذِينَ أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ بَعْدُ وَقَاتَلُوا. As for those who fought in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they fought and they sort of came at a later stage, but what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? They will never be equal to those who fought before. مع أنهم كلهم أنفقوا وقاتلوا لكن هؤلاء أعظم درجة. Even though all of them now spend their wealth in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all of them now fight in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they will never have the same status, right? And this is the sibaq. This is the competition. This is what the real, the vying is. How can we be the first to do our duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because everyone, and Prophet promised, everyone is going to come onto the deen. A time will come when the deen will spread through every single house and home on the face of the earth. Prophet said there will not be a single house, whether that house is made of mud or fur or every single person on the face of the earth will accept Islam one day. The Prophet gave that guarantee, right? And we hope it is not far off. But are we going to be used for that honor and that duty, right? And then when people accept Islam, how do you, when you hear sometimes a person who has come into Islam and then they're speaking about certain aspects of the deen, right? How do you feel? How do you feel? You feel proud that this is someone that is now understanding How would you feel if that was actually your student or someone that accepted Islam at your hands, right? And so we need to prioritize our, what are we doing for the sake of the deen. مع أنهم كلهم أنفقوا وقاتلوا لكن هؤلاء أعظم درجة لأنهم أنفقوا وقاتلوا وقت الشدة, because they spend their wealth and they fought in the times of severity. ووقت إن كان الحال أصعب, and when things were more difficult. وقبل الفتح, before the conquest, فبينت بذلك المراتب للاستجابة لهذه الدعوة. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then distinguished them with these stages because of their answering the call and being the first to assist the Prophet ﷺ, right? And many times, look at the stages when the Battle of Badr took place. After the Battle of Badr, right? What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about the people of Badr? Right? After the Battle of Badr, one of the famous ahadith in Sahih Bukhari, Jibreel alayhi salam comes and asks the Prophet ﷺ, what is your opinion, or how do you, what do you think? What is your estimation of those who took part in the Battle of Badr? The Prophet said, they are the best amongst us. And then Jibreel alayhi salam replied, likewise, those angels in the heavens who took part in the Battle of the Badr, they are the best of the angels, right? To such an extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did he say to the Ahl Badr? اعملوا ما شئتم فقد غفرت لكم. Do whatever you wish, I've forgiven you. Right? This hadith, to such an extent that in the Sahih al-Bukhari, when it comes to the section and it's in the middle, it's almost in the middle of Sahih Bukhari, he has a special chapter where he just mentions the names of the people of Badr. This is their station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Badr, right? And he would give who fought in the battle of Badr. And then people would even use this as a means of making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would take the names and they would read. There's a famous poem. One of the scholars wrote it in a form of Arabic poetry. It just mentioning the names of the people that took part in the Battle of Badr. Why? Is because they responded to the call of Prophet in the most difficult of times. And they say dua is accepted when these names are actually recited. And these names, they say they are the most powerful souls in the universe after the souls of the prophets. And there is no one with a higher rank than them after the prophets and the people of Badr. To such an extent, the one Sahabi, Abu Bakr, forget the Sahabi's name. Before the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ was going to go, he kept it secret because he was going to take the Quraysh by surprise. So one of the Sahaba, because he has family there and he didn't have protection for them, he writes a letter, he sends it with a woman slave to inform the people of Mecca that the Prophet ﷺ is coming. Why? He was hoping that they would then be able to protect his family, because in their minds, when the conquest is coming, there's going to be bloodshed, right? What is this in legal terminology? This is treason, right? This is treason. The Prophet ﷺ obviously receives revelation and he knows what this Sahabi has done. So he sends Sayyidina Ali and someone else to go and intercept this woman. And finally they get the letter and he comes back. He shows the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ calls that Sahabi, right? What is this? Then he mentions the Prophet ﷺ. It is not kufr, it is not disbelief or treason. Everyone here in Mecca had someone to protect their family, and I didn't have anyone to protect their family. Sayyidina Umar stands up. Obviously, and he wants to take him out because this is treason. And then what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He says, Umar, he took part in Badr. He's a Badri, he's of the Badriyin. And what do you know? Allah perhaps looked upon the people of Badr and said, do whatever you wish, I have forgiven you. And the purpose, one of the ways in which people try to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to try and do things in times of difficulty with the hope that Allah will give them the station, right? And when you reach this station, they say that even your sayyi'at fi da'irat al-afu, even your bad deeds are forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan, he also reached the station, right? When did he reach it? When he bought the well of Roma. The well, obviously, the Muslims in Medina didn't have sweet water, and he spent a large amount of money to buy this. And the Prophet told him, now, do whatever you wish, Allah has forgiven you. And with that, they still were foremost in their good deeds. And so we should always be seeking out ways to get the station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What can we do in times? And this usually happens when, for example, a person who is harming you, a person who's been bad to you, has been treated you in a bad way for years and years and years. Now the time comes to help him and assist him. Do you rush or do you say, no, now he deserves it? Again, we want stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want stations with people. And how on a daily basis? And Allah gives everyone this opportunity. No one will have an excuse on the day of Qiyamah to say that I didn't have an opportunity to reach these highest stations, right? Because Allah does not wrong anyone. And so Allah, and in your life as you are now, you know exactly there were opportunities that Allah gave you to do good, to do the greatest good. And whether you did or didn't, everyone knows their own selves very well. إذا فهمتم ذلك فإن نحن في أعمالنا من مراتب هذه الاستجابة. And so if we understand this, then where are we in our actions, in our levels of responding to the scope? بمعنى أننا نريد أن ندرك حق الإدراك لمعنى انتمائنا لهذه الدعوة وقيامنا بها. Meaning that we want to really understand and we want people to delve into the true realities of what does it mean that we are connected to this da'wah, right? And that we want to establish this da'wah. What does it mean? We are Muslims, we are connected to the school, and more so if we are connected to the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who their life's work is the deen, right? And the three objectives. What does it mean that we are connected to these people? Some people might want to sit back and say, oh, I'm connected to Shaykh so-and-so, and mashallah, he's such a great, mashallah, you're connected to him, but now what's your responsibility towards this connection that you have? Right? If we need to ponder and think about this connection. And intima is like your affiliation. So you belong to a certain group, right? You belong to a certain, so for example, you belong to a certain football club, and this football club is known to perform, right? You've got to pull your weight in that particular sports club. You've got to train, right? They're known for high levels. What is your affiliation when you are a graduate of a certain university or you are studying at a certain university? They expect more from you than they expect from other people. And even if you are the administration of that university, you need to run it in a way to keep those standards up as well. So your affiliations in the deen to whichever group or sheikh or organization or masjid or whatever it is, you've got to think about those affiliations. You're living up to the responsibilities of those affiliations. وَمَا هُوَ تَفْسِيرُهُ, and what is the translation of these affiliations in our life? وَمَا هُوَ بَيَانُهُ, how are we explaining that affiliations to people in our day-to-day actions? وَمَا هِيَ حَقِيقَتُهُ, and what is its reality? And the true reality, no one actually will know, because it is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Habib Umar, he says, every single person on the face of the earth besides the Prophet ﷺ will never, ever, ever, ever be able to understand the greatness of this deen and the greatness of the da'wah. And all the great people that came in the past that did the work of da'wah, they understood that they are only doing as much as their own capacities allowed in understanding. But the true nature of the deen, only the Prophet ﷺ can fulfill its haqq and fulfill its duty and fulfill its right. Right? Meaning, what we think we know of the deen is actually very, 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 very minuscule. وندرك أن الله فيه اختيارا يظهر في الصدق والعزم من المستجيبين. And we need to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses people, right? And who He chooses then manifests in people's truthfulness and their determination in responding to the call. When you see people doing this work, then you must know this is someone whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for His work. But it's also, you have the opportunity to actually do that, right? And this is the whole, again, the paradox of proximity. Is it Allah choosing you? Are you making the effort and your choosing then becomes manifest? You have to do your ability to the best that you can. وَنُدْرِكُ أَنَّهُ لَا يَصْلُحُ لَهُ مَنْ آثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. And we need to also understand that none will be worthy of this great honor if they give preference to this worldly life. They give preference to just living their life, right? وَلَا يَصْلُحُ لَهُ مَنْ كَانَ قَصْدُهُ غَيْرَ الْحَقِّ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. And none will also be worthy of it if they desire through it other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are many people that might also be doing da'wah, right? but they are seeking name, they are seeking fame, and they are seeking wealth, and they are seeking position in the hearts of people. This person has the external form of da'wah, but he will never reach the realities, and the effects of that will be very little. إذا أدركنا معنى اجتماعنا وإياكم واستجابتنا لهذا الدعوة. So if we understand these realities that we have been speaking of, right, and we understand the meanings of why we have come together here and why we have decided together to respond to this call, فنعلم أنه لا يقوم أمرها إلا بصفات يجب أن نتخلى عنها وننخلع منها. And so if we realize our responsibilities to this da'wah and our meeting for its sake, then we need to know that this da'wah will never be established except if we realize that there are qualities in our hearts that we need to get rid of. And we need to uproot the evil qualities. Right? And again, the da'wah is the greatest way to purify your heart. Your heart is not going to be purified sitting in khalwa. You can be sitting in khalwa for 10 years. But the true test of whether you're patient or not comes when you're in society or you're in working with people and someone then does something which now requires you to be patient. Or when you're in a situation which requires you to be generous. And so you can be sitting in khalwa all the time thinking you're a generous person. And after 50 years, you come out and you realize that, you know what, all the dhikr that I was doing in ibadah has just made those negative qualities stronger in my heart. And this is a very important principle, that ibadah doesn't purify your heart. Ibadah strengthens your heart, right? Unless a person, the ibadah is the salah and salutation of the Prophet. But the tajalli ibadah, and we're talking about over and above your obligatory and the established sunnah. So a person sits and does tons and tons of dhikr, or unless the dhikr is given by a shaykh who understands, and his wadifa, his job is spiritual purification. But generally, the mujahada, for example, how do you remove pride from your heart? Pride from your heart doesn't go by reading. Pride won't go out of your heart by sitting and doing ibadah. How does pride go out of you? You've got to go and do things to humble yourself in front of people, right? How do you get rid of stinginess? Stinginess is not going to get, you're not going to get rid of stinginess by fasting or by sitting in the masjid. Stinginess will only go if you go and interact with people and you spend your money on people. And likewise, all of these qualities, right, there is a physical mujahada that's required. And so some people, so even in the book Ihsaan he mentions this, that if a person has pride or for anger or malice or jealousy in their heart, and then they go and do lots and lots of ibadah, what that ibadah is actually doing is only strengthening your heart. It means you're only increasing in arrogance and pride, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept a polluted vessel, right? That vessel needs to be purified first. And this is why when people would come to the mashayikh for tarbiyah, even though they might have been ulama, they might have been traders, what do? They give them menial tasks to do. Why? To get rid of that pride in the heart. So the example is given of someone, a great alim that came, and after teaching many, many years, he realizes that, you know what, it's not just about teaching, but my heart is corrupted, because I need to purify my heart for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he comes to one of the well-known mashayikh of tarbiyah at his time. And the day he comes, his students are there as well in all this. So the sheikh takes a piece of bread and throws it in the corner. He says, go eat there, right? And also we see how they would test the muris. Obviously, today's times, the mashayikh don't test people. They won't even last. Right? Imam al-Haddad sent one of his students who came and told him, your sheikh is actually in India. So he went to India and knocked on the door. The sheikh asked the servant, who's at the door? He said, so-and-so, he's come from Hadramaut, he's traveled so long, but he's so-and-so, and he said, leave him outside. After people had washed their hands for lunch, take that water, go throw it on him while he's sitting outside. Is he still there, or is he gone? Sitting in the hot sun, right? They would test people, they would test their sincerity in this way. Why? Is because we don't test a person's sincerity. You don't really know why they're doing things, right? So these qualities a person needs to remove from their heart. So a person who is involved in worship, in ibadah, in ta'ah, if you are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you have pride and you haven't actually gotten rid of that pride and anger and malice and jealousy, that ibadah is only increasing you in. And what is the way? What is the way of purifying the heart? And so the example is given of someone who is stingy. The person is stingy and he thinks to himself, okay, you know what? I need to purify my heart. Perhaps I should fast. And so he starts fasting day after day after day, not realizing that his fasting is only increasing his stinginess. Why? He doesn't realize the minute deficiencies of the soul. When he's fasting, he doesn't need to now spend money at work or at school or university. He doesn't need to buy lunch, because when he buys lunch, you usually have to spend on your on your friends or people around you. So he thinks his path is fasting, but his path is actually taking him further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and increasing him in stinginess. So there has to be this mujahada. And so this person comes to the Shaykh throws it in the corner, and he goes and he eats it. He realizes that, okay, you know what? He has some sincerity. So the Shaykh then takes him and tells him, your place to sleep is in the stables of the horses. Or if he's sincere, he'll stay. If he's not sincere, he'll say, what is this? And so he realizes, okay. And the students are amazed. They think this is Shaykh so-and-so, you know, he's the great alim and whatever. And they're feeling shy. So they're asking the Shaykh, but you know, we'll give him our place. Yes, no, that's his place. Because in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not about how much knowledge you have or how much wealth you have. It's about how pure your heart is. Has your heart been burned in the furnace of mujahada to reveal its gold? Right? And this is why people would spend time in the company of the mashayikh. Right? So that when you have gold ore and it's the mixture of the pure gold, and what do you have to do? It's burnt, it's smelted, and then what happens? And that smelting is the mujahada. That's the difficult process of killing the ego. So he puts him in the stables, and a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, a month goes by, right? And he's coming for the programs, he's coming for the lessons, coming for the dhikr. And now the students are still very, very concerned. So they say, you know what, the Shaykh says he's not ready yet. And he tests him. So he tells the servant to go and clean the stables. And when they're cleaning the stables, you know, they're taking the manure and putting it into. And now when he goes to the stables, he sees this the scholar now, he's laid out his sajjada there, and he's got his mushaf, right? And he's got his big tasbih, and he's doing his dhikr in the stables, thinking that now this is, maybe the Shaykh put him there so he's, you know, away from people, no one must distract him from his ibadah. And the Shaykh tells the servant, now when you're going past him and you're cleaning, drop some of that manure onto his sajjada, onto his musalla. And so he's doing ibadah and dhikr, and this person's cleaning, whatever. And as the servant's cleaning, he drops it onto he's telling, what? Can you not see what you're doing? You're distracting my ibadah, and this is najis now, and I have to go wash it, and his anger hits the roof. So when the servant comes back, when the Shaykh asks the servant what happened, he said this, that. The students all became sad. They knew he wasn't ready. So another few months goes by, right? And now he's doing the dhikr, which the Shaykh asked him to do. He's attending the programs. And after a few months, he tells the servant to go now and do the same thing. He says, now you're going, drop some, as you're cleaning. And every day the servant comes and cleans, right? But this particular days, he tells you, okay, now mess some of it on his sajjada again. And this time when he's coming, drops it on the sajjada, he gets angry, but you can see he's like he's just now, he's just keeping it in, right? He wants to shout, he wants to explode with anger, but now he's learning to now control. He learns that I need to control my anger. And so he comes back, servant narrates this to the Shaykh. Shaykh says he's still not ready. And months then go by again. Sometimes it might not be months, people might need years and years. And some people live their entire lives and they don't actually reach the desired level. Until after a few months, when the servant is asked, the Shaykh tells him, now go and drop it onto him himself, not just the sajjada. And when the servant is going and drops it onto him, he gets up and he apologizes. He says, so sorry, I'm in your way, let me help you. And he starts cleaning it up. And he says, no, you don't have to do this anymore. From today, I'm going to clean the stable myself. And then the Shaykh knew now he had attained where that pride had gone out. And if you cannot see yourself doing any human being on earth, if they have what you regard as a menial task, right? Whether it's a street sweeper, your domestic worker, anything else, even people that clean the sewage, right? If you cannot see yourself doing the work that they do, means you have pride in your heart. Because there should be no menial task too menial for you. And this is why this is why they would put people through this mujahada. And you have to train your nafs. Can you go and clean your own toilets today? Tell your domestic today, listen, I'll do it for you. You don't have to do it today. That same thing which prevents you from doing it, or just that thought that, astaghfirullah, how can I do that? Right? That is pride. Why is it fit for them to? And when you read the description of the Prophet ﷺ, in his home, they said he was as one of us. He would sweep the home and he would patch his own clothes. He mended his own clothing. He would patch his own shoes. Many times also when the students realize this, and you hear the stories of people that they would go, right, and they would then ask the Shaykh for, give us some khidmah to do, and that khidmah is to remove the pride from that. So go do the dishes. One of the students mentioned this as well. He says, I never understood what khidmah was. But when I was washing the dishes in Darul Mustafa, Allah started to inspire me with different ways of how I need to purify my heart. As I'm washing those dishes and I'm seeing that, sometimes like the food that is fresh, that, when they just finished eating and we wash it, it's easier to remove those than the dishes that were left behind. Likewise, the qualities which you realize are evil and you work on them, they'll be easier to get rid of than qualities that you realize but you just sit behind. And he says, through this khidmah, Allah started to inspire me with ways of purifying my heart. That is tarbiyah. You can be sitting in the musalla your whole life, you're not going to get that experiential tarbiyah, right? And then also it would have different levels, right? And they would vie to even say, who are the ones that can clean the toilets? And then when you clean the toilets, you're going to use a glove or you're going to use your bare hands, right? Obviously in the Sharia, it is not advised to have mubashara, to touch any najasa directly with your hands, right? But for tarbiyah purposes, sometimes some people push themselves to that level. Why? The whole purpose is to kill the nafs. Someone has to clean toilets. In the past, before we have these plumbing systems as well, how was it? Right, the bucket system. Someone had to go in and look at the hearts. And if you ever meet someone who had that job, and even today, for example, in Hadramaut, sometimes when the sewage gets clogged, right, they come with this big truck and this guy's got to put his hand into that. And when you meet these people, they have the softest of hearts, right? They have the softest of hearts. And that person, even though he's doing that menial task, but his heart might be more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than someone who's doing this and doing that and think that they, right? And this is why the focus on the heart. And Habib Umar is then explaining this. We have to get rid of these bad qualities. If we want to establish ourselves as helpers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the deen, then it is imperative that we get rid of these bad qualities. وَنَتَصَفَّى فَنَقْلَعَ جُذُورَهَا مِنَّا, right? And that we purify ourselves by removing these things from their roots. Because the spiritual diseases have manifestations, but then they have the root causes. And this is the whole purpose of the tarbiyah, of the spiritual purification. And people that establish their path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not based on ridding themselves of these evil qualities, and they base their spiritual path on ibadah, they haven't understood what spiritual purification is. And this is why Imam Ghazali wrote his Ihya Ulumuddin, and especially the third volume. Okay? وصفات يجب أن نتحلى بها ونتثبت عليها. And then there are qualities which it is imperative that we adorn ourselves with them and that we establish ourselves in them. ونتشبث بها. And we take them with full determination, right? ونقوي مضرسها في نفوسها. And that we strengthen its seeds in our hearts. يترتب عليه بعد ذلك قيام كل عامل منا في أي مجال من مجالات العمل في هذه الدعوة. And according to your doing this here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then establish every person in certain duties in which they would be able to serve this da'wah. Right? So someone who hasn't purified their heart and they're trying to do da'wah and they have pride or arrogance, they will never have that patience to work with people. Right? And that then their da'wah will be more detrimental than helping people. If you want to help people come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to be patient, knowing that people are going to make mistakes. People are going to fall into sin. People will not respond initially, when everyone has different levels. But if you're going to get upset because if you are someone who cannot be patient because if someone hasn't listened to you, you find this also with your spouse and your kids. We get angry because they didn't listen to us. Who are we in the first place? Right? In the home, obviously there has to be that other, but in your mind, and when you're doing da'wah with people, I told them, but they didn't listen. The people of Allah blame themselves. If they didn't listen, it's because I wasn't sincere, or I haven't been making dua for them at night. Now, في البلد أو في خارجها قيامه بالأمر على وجه الصفاء. And so it is imperative for every person to imbibe themselves with these good qualities in the different areas or countries that they will be fulfilling this da'wah, and it should be done ala wajh safa. It should be done with a purity of heart. It should be done with with truthfulness and sincerity. Ala wajh naqa, ala wajh tuqa. Right? It needs to be done with a sense of spiritual purity, ala wajh tuqa, and a consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa ala wajh ihsan, and with excellence, wa ala wajh itqan, right? With perfection. وعلى وجه التفاني وبذل الوسع, and it also needs to be done with a person giving it the entire being and the entire self. And we need to ask ourselves, for the sake of the da'wah, how much of my physical health and wealth am I spending for the sake of the da'wah? Or is it someone else's responsibility? And if you can't establish it, if you can't establish something yourselves, then support things which are established, and you get the rewards. And the people who have wealth, they know that the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to support those who are doing da'wah. And if you have that intention, everything that they do will be in your good deeds. And that's the quickest way also for people of wealth to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is it that is doing da'wah, that is, you can see the effect in society, they are uplifting people, they are bringing people to the deen. Go and support them with your wealth and with your health as well, with your time. If you can't give every day, give every second day sometime. If you can't give every second day, give it once a week. And in today's times, one of the ways in which every single person can fulfill this duty, and especially we spoke about this in our first or second lesson, is bring people into the deen, find new Muslims, or find Muslims that don't even know the basics of the deen, of how to read salah, or how to even read Quran, or how to make wudu, and start teaching them. If you are a Muslim your whole life, and you've gone through, for example, in South Africa, the maktab system, you have enough knowledge to take a new Muslim from zero to a very, very decent level in practicing the deen. What excuse do you have not to do that? We have institutions all over that teach new Muslims Islam. Go and volunteer 1 hour. I can do 1 hour a week. And it's so easy today with social media. Can you not give 1 hour of your time a week to say, listen, if there's any non-Muslim out there, I will choose to help someone with their deen. It doesn't even have to be a non-Muslim. It can be a Muslim. But there are certain aspects of their deen they might not have learned. How many people in the past, maybe decades or so, they haven't even gone to the madrasa system. The guy's got a university degree, but he can't even read Quran properly. Do we see this or don't we see this? Right? And these people are looking for help, but sometimes they are shy to ask. So use your social media, use your interactions, use your WhatsApp groups, use whatever it is to teach one person. And say, Ya Allah, this is my effort. Even though it's small, it's my effort for, I want to be part of this great responsibility of the da'wah. And this is now they say indiraj. Now you get, and when you start that, you'll see how the doors start opening up for you. If it's done, and you can only, some person might think, okay, but I'm not sincere, right? How else are you going to learn sincerity? Start, right? The da'wah, the purification of the heart starts when you start doing the work. And this is why even people, when they would say, Imam al-Haddad, he mentions this in his Da'wah Tama, right? When Imam al-Haddad has a complete book about da'wah, the perfect call or the complete call. A person says, oh, but I'm not practicing, so I can't do da'wah. He says, now you have 2 sins to your name. If you are not practicing and you do da'wah, you have only 1 sin because you're not practicing. But if you're not practicing and you don't do da'wah, now you have 2 sins to your name, right? And when you're doing the da'wah, you start realizing that, you know what, and you start feeling shy. How can I be talking to someone about this? And when you're teaching a new Muslim about Islam and Salah, Allah then opens up and inspires you with new ways of understanding yourself, your own Salah. And therefore, the way that the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also used to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was da'wah, right? Because in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that translates in how you teach other people. And as Habib will explain later, is you can only do the da'wah if you have been called. And when you calling, meaning there's a spiritual station or there is something that you are involved in. Then you fulfill those duties, you are then called to a higher level. And then you fulfill those, and it continues and continues. And you can only continue on this spiral or this upward spiral if you are doing da'wah. As soon as you stop doing da'wah, you become stagnant. أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى يكون التوفيق وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات الصبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات الصبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. إلى حضرة النبي